welcome back, and in this video I'll be giving you some information on the practices in extreme programming, and this is part 2 video. So if you haven't got to see the part 1 video where I explained about the planning and the designing extreme programming practices, you can click on the link given in the description box. And if you want to know more about extreme programming, I've also taken a video on what is extreme programming, the values of extreme programming, so you can click on the link that I've also shared in the description box. So let's get into this video. So as I said, now that every phase in the software development life cycle has extra, magic to it, or there's a little bit of addition that was done in the extreme programming framework that consists of different practices. So because of adding those different practices is what gave the real beauty to extreme programming framework. So in the previous video we had seen about the planning and the designing, and in this video we'll be looking at the development practices and also the testing phase extreme programming practices. So in the development phase there are some practices. The first one is coding standards. So when designing a software and when you're managing the software information, so developers generally in extreme programming, they follow certain standards, a particular and uniform standard every developer will follow, which can be the code structure, the how components need to be arranged, the file arrangements, everything would be in a structure. By this, everyone's code will be very similar and it will be easy to understand and read the entire code. The next one is pair programming. So if you're from the traditional side of software development, then this might be something new to you. So pair programming is where two developers would pair together, where one would be the anchor and the other one would be the supporting programmer. Through this, when two developers, the main idea is when two developers pair together, there's always extra room for sharing knowledge, and also in case there is some correction or feedback that needs to be done to the code, different ideas can also be shared, and therefore it would increase the software quality. So that's why it's always recommended for that developers, they do pair programming. The next practice is a 40-hour work week. So it's always recommended and suggested that people should have a 40-hour work week. By this, the development team and employees, they would have a perfect work-life balance between their work and their personal life. And it would also keep them more relaxed, and it will give them a little bit of an energizer when they have to come back for the next week. The next one is continuous integration. So continuous integration is nothing but the practice where in software development, where every coder or where every developer would continuously deploy and integrate their code with the existing software. So through this is when every update is being regularly integrated and deployed, every developer working on the team would have an updated version of the code. By this, you'll be constantly releasing value to the customer, as well as there's always constant integration and deployment. So it's also called as the CI/CD, which is a continuous integration and continuous deployment of software. So this is one of the development practices, and the last one is code ownership. So code ownership is something where all the developers in the team would have the general and overall ownership of the entire code, which means everyone would know what each code is about, and therefore there will not be any bottleneck. So if there is a dependency on one developer for a particular piece of code, then if the developer is not available, it would create a little bit of a blocker. So in this practice, in extreme programming, this practice emphasizes that everyone should be the owner of the entire product code, so that there is no bottlenecks, and in any time if there is any issue, anyone can just pop into it and then check the code. The next one is the testing phase practices. So the very first one is TDD, which is called as test driven development. This is one of a very important practice that is prevailing in extreme programming. Test driven development is nothing but the idea where test cases are first written down and then the code is being built. So this is the main idea. So whenever developers they sit down to build a logic, they don't always start off with the code. First they understand what is the entire use case of the code, what needs to be solved, and then they start creating test cases. And test cases are created for both the positive, the happy path, as well as for alternate paths, and also for exceptional scenarios. So when taking all these test cases into account, the developer would know exactly what needs to be covered in their code, what different scenarios need to be covered in their code. So by this, there's very little room for errors to occur and for scenarios not to be taken into account. So generally the developers, the business team, the QA team all sit together and discuss. So in case there's other requirements linking to other features that is dependent on the piece of code that's going to be developed, the developers would also keep that in mind when they are building their code. So this is the main important feature in test-driven development, where test cases are created first before the code. The next one is the regular unit testing and UAT testing. So unit testing is when every developer, after building their code, would first test all the test cases of the single code, which is as a unit. Once unit testing passes, then it will move on to the other types of testing, which can be regression, integration testing, etc. The next one is UAT. So UAT also is a general practice that is followed in testing, where the software is given to the end users and their acceptance also needs to be provided in order to move the product to the production environment. So the main key feature that you need to keep, the practice you need to keep in mind in the testing phase is the TDD. So this is about the extreme programming practices for the development and the testing phase of software development. I hope that this video gave you some information and it was useful. So if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to this channel and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.